It's week number 34 of the coronavirus pandemic here in Los Angeles. And let me start off by talking about the weather that we've had this past week and we're currently having right now in Los Angeles. Now, at the beginning of the week, it was pretty typical fall weather. However, there was a little bit of a twist. It was cool in the morning, but once afternoon rolled around, it was very, very hot. We're talking about 90-degree weather. It was very hot. I felt like there was another heat wave coming. But by the time the evening was rolling around, it went cold again. And it was going back and forth for the past Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. However, once Thursday came around, things started changing, and now we kind of going into this next shift of cooler weather. And then it all changed yesterday on Saturday, in which there was a winter storm all over the Los Angeles area. There was rain, there was hail, there was snow all over the place. And that just showed how winter is basically around the corner right now, and that fall is finally here as well. So that was pretty strange. Moving on to the next section of this video, the United States presidential election. The election of 2020, and what an election it was. It was an election full of twists and turns, disappointment, excitement, anticipation, nervousness, and a lot of sleepless nights, to say the least. It was another opportunity for all Americans to understand and relearn the election process. How do we determine who is going to be the president for the next 4 years? And also the power of voting. How does my vote impact the presidential race? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down as simple as possible what unfolded during this election. Because this election did not take one day to decide. It took several days in order for us to finally find out who's going to be the president of the United States in the next 4 years. And it all started on Election Day, November 3rd, Tuesday. On Tuesday, Election Day, it started for me in the morning, in which I actually had to take my dad to go vote. Because instead of what I did, in which I voted through mail, he wanted to vote in person. So when we went to the voting booth, that booth actually had to follow COVID-19 protocols. Everyone was required to social distance 6 feet apart. They had to wear a mask or any type of face covering, both the voter and also the volunteers helping everyone else. And then lastly, everyone was given hand sanitizer before and after casting their vote. So after my father voted, he was given the sticker, I voted, just like the one I'm wearing, and then we went home and we waited. Because traditionally, on election day and night, we would be given the winner of the presidential race. Who won the presidency? Who is going to be the president for the next 4 years? However, that wasn't the case this year because of many reasons. Number one, we're living during a pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, so that made voting very difficult. Secondly, the majority of Americans did exactly what I did, voted through mail, almost 80 to 85%. And then lastly, this actually goes throughout the United States, most of the states actually. What they would do on election day was that they would count the in-person voting first, the people that voted on that day, November 3rd first, and then would count the people that voted through mail, the mail-in ballots. So a lot of the states already said that they would not get any clear results on that night. And some of the states, because depending on their population, it would take a very, very long time. So on Tuesday, we didn't have any clear winner. We didn't know who was going to be the next president of the United States. It was too close to call. So what I'm going to do is going to explain how is it we decide in the United States who is going to be the next president of the United States. Now, the map that you see in front of you shows all 50 states of the United States of America. And each of the states has a number. Now that number represents the number of electoral votes each state has. So, depending on the population of each state, that determines the number of electoral votes. So, if the state has a high population, it has a high number of electoral votes. If the state has a low population, then they have a low number of electoral votes. Now, this is where the key thing is. In order for a person who is running for the presidency, they need to at least win 270 electoral votes. 270 is the magic number for someone who is running for presidency to become president-elect. Now, moving on to the next map. That's the map that shows what were the votes so far on Tuesday night. The red represents the Republican Party that's being led by Donald Trump, the current president. That is the number of electoral votes and states that he has won so far on Tuesday night. Now, the blue side represents the Democratic Party, which is being led by Joe Biden. And he has won that many states. Now, it may look like Donald Trump is winning because of that area that is being shaded all red, but if you see on top, Joe Biden leads with 223 electoral votes versus Donald Trump's 212 votes. Remember, the electoral votes, depending on the states and the population, that's how much you have. So far, Biden is winning, but all those other states that are blank are too close to call, and they're still counting the votes. Now move on to the next slide. On Wednesday, now Joe Biden is leading with 238 votes versus Donald Trump's 213. Biden won more electoral votes. And if you see, Joe Biden actually flipped the state of Wisconsin. And he hasn't won it yet, but he is close to winning it because at first he was losing again. Most of the states were first counting the in-person votes and then were counting the votes that were by mail. So the mail-in ballots are now being counted, and there are a lot of them for Joe Biden. Now move on to the next day. On Thursday, Joe Biden wins again, more electoral votes in more states. Now it's up to 264 versus Trump's 214. And again, Joe Biden flips the state of Michigan. He was losing that state during the past 2 days, but now he actually won it. So now he has that state. And he only needs now 6 more electoral votes in order to become the presidency. So if he can get another state with 6 more electoral votes or more, that's game over. While Donald Trump would need all of the states and keep Joe Biden at bay. But it doesn't look like it was happening. Now move on to the next slide. On Friday, now Joe Biden still has 264 votes versus Trump's 214. However, if you now see, Biden is now gaining more votes because of the voting by mail, the mail-in ballots in the state of Pennsylvania and Georgia. If he wins either of them, he becomes the president of the United States. How things dramatically change because of the power of voting. And then lastly, on Saturday, it was announced Joe Biden wins the state of Pennsylvania, and with that, he has surpassed 270 electoral votes. He has now 284 votes versus Trump's 214, which makes it virtually impossible for Trump to catch up. And by then, on November 7th, 2020, Saturday, Joe Biden becomes the next president of the United States, the 46th president. And what's even more historic is that his vice president actually will become the first vice president that is a woman and a woman of color, Kamala Harris. And she actually comes from my state of California. And once that was announced, there was huge celebrations all over the city of Los Angeles, New York, Pennsylvania, Georgia, DC, everywhere. But there was also a number of people, mainly Trump supporters, that weren't celebrating, because even though a lot of the news agencies were showing that Biden won the presidency, Trump is not convinced. He thinks that there might be some voter fraud, some illegal voting, even though it hasn't been proven yet. But he is actually going to take it to court and fight to see if there is some sort of voting fraud or illegal voting. So he hasn't conceded defeat yet. But most of the world right now believes that Joe Biden has won the presidency. So in the end, we will see, and I will give you more of an update. But that's exactly what happened. This is what happened of the power of voting. Regarding the coronavirus here in Los Angeles, the number of hospitalizations and deaths are still in low numbers. However, there were some unfortunate news that was reported by the Los Angeles Public County of Health. It said that the number of cases actually has risen for the past few days, and it's actually going to continue. It's actually in the high 2000s, and it actually was because of a lot of factors. Number one, probably because of the Halloween gatherings. Number two, Election Day and the days that followed. And also because of the weather change so far. While the news in the city of Los Angeles looks bad, it's actually much worse talking about the entire country of the United States. Because according to the Johns Hopkins University data, the United States actually has surpassed two grim milestones this past week. Number one, the United States has surpassed over 10 million cases of COVID-19 so far since the start of this pandemic. And secondly, it actually has surpassed 239,000 American deaths because of COVID-19 related symptoms. No other country in the world comes close to both of those numbers. And to make matters much dire and much worse, there was another piece of data that they wanted to share in which it showed this past week the United States was actually getting 100,000 cases daily this past week. 100,000 daily new cases of COVID-19. These are staggering numbers that we're seeing all over the United States. And if there was any proof that you wanted to see that there was a second wave that was already here, this is it. Lastly, I wanted to talk about some of the words that the President-elect Joe Biden said in his victory speech, in which no matter what your political affiliation is, if you like them or not, those were some words that everyone should at least have a chance to listen. He talks about unity, talks about compassion, talks about empathy, talks about fighting to survive during this pandemic. And I believe that if we all do our best, if we do the simple things right, just wearing a mask when we go outside, we have a fighting chance. Because we have to be more selfless and less selfish. More understanding, less judging. More love, less hate. And I think if we can do those things, we still have a fighting chance. And I know that we have that chance. And we're going to do it. We're going to make sure that we beat this virus. And once that vaccine is made, it was all worth it. And I know we can do it. So everyone, stay strong, stay safe.